Captain Marcus Thompson had served the royal family for 23 years. His broad shoulders and stern expression made him the perfect picture of a royal guard. Every morning at dawn, he would stand outside the palace gates, watching over the grounds with eyes that missed nothing. The other guards respected him deeply, and the royal staff knew they could count on his unwavering dedication. Marcus came from a military family. His father had been a soldier and his grandfather before him. Service to the crown was in his blood. When he first put on the royal uniform, he felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. He had protected 3 generations of royals, always maintaining perfect discipline and proper distance. The job required him to be invisible yet always present. He learned to read situations quickly, to spot trouble before it started, and to move with silent efficiency. Over the years, he had prevented numerous security incidents, always staying in the background while keeping the royal family safe. His colleagues often joked that Marcus was like a human shield, ready to step in front of any danger. But something had been changing in Marcus recently. After 2 decades of service, the rigid protocols and endless formalities were wearing on him. He found himself questioning whether this life of constant vigilance and emotional distance was what he truly wanted. The palace walls that once felt like home now seemed like a beautiful prison. Marcus had been thinking about retirement more often. He imagined a small cottage in the countryside, perhaps near his sister's family. He could finally relax, maybe even start that woodworking hobby he had always pushed aside. The thought of sleeping past dawn and having conversations that weren't about security protocols filled him with a longing he hadn't expected. His wife Sarah had been patient for years, understanding that his duty came first. But lately she had been dropping gentle hints about wanting him home more often. Their children were grown now, but she wanted to travel, to spend time together without the constant worry about his safety. Marcus knew she deserved better than a husband who was always emotionally guarded, trained to keep everyone at arm's length. The morning routine continued as always. Marcus checked his watch, adjusted his uniform, and prepared for another day of silent service. He had no idea that this particular day would change everything he thought he knew about duty, loyalty, and what truly mattered in life. The young prince he had watched grow up was about to teach him a lesson that would shake the very foundation of his beliefs. As he walked through the palace corridors, Marcus reflected on all the royal children he had protected over the years. Each one had their own personality, their own way of dealing with the pressures of royal life. But Prince George had always been different. There was something genuine about the boy, something that reminded Marcus why he had chosen this path in the first place. Prince George was 8 years old and had the curious nature that most children his age possessed. Unlike many royal children who were constantly surrounded by tutors and handlers, George often found moments to escape the formal structure of palace life. Marcus had watched him grow from a toddler into a bright, energetic boy who asked questions about everything and everyone around him. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus was stationed near the palace gardens where Prince George often played. The boy had a habit of wandering off during his outdoor time, much to the concern of his nannies. Marcus always kept a careful eye on him, maintaining the proper distance while ensuring his safety. The gardens were peaceful that morning. Birds chirped in the ancient oak trees and the smell of roses filled the air. Prince George was supposed to be having his nature lesson with his tutor, but as usual, his attention had wandered. Marcus watched as the boy spotted something near the garden wall and began walking toward it with obvious curiosity. As George approached the corner of the garden, Marcus noticed what had caught the prince's attention. An elderly man was sitting on the ground outside the palace gates, leaning against the stone wall. The man appeared to be homeless, with worn clothes and a tired expression. He was holding a small cardboard sign, though Marcus couldn't read what it said from his position. Protocol was clear in situations like this. Marcus should have immediately guided Prince George away from the fence and alerted security about the man's presence. Homeless individuals near the palace grounds were usually moved along quickly and quietly. It was a matter of security and maintaining the proper image of the royal residence. But something made Marcus pause. Instead of moving immediately, he found himself watching to see what Prince George would do. The boy had stopped walking and was simply standing there, looking at the elderly man through the iron bars of the gate. There was something in the prince's expression that Marcus had never seen before. a kind of deep thinking that seemed unusual for such a young child. Prince George looked around to make sure no adults were watching him, then quietly walked closer to the gate. Marcus tensed, ready to intervene, but something told him to wait just a moment longer. The boy reached into his pocket and pulled out something small. Marcus realized it was the sandwich that had been packed for his morning snack, still wrapped in the royal kitchen's distinctive cloth. Without hesitation, Prince George carefully pushed the sandwich through the bars of the gate to the elderly man. The homeless man looked up in surprise, his tired eyes meeting those of the young prince. For a moment they simply looked at each other, and Marcus could see genuine kindness passing between them. The elderly man's face transformed. The exhaustion and despair that had marked his features were replaced by something else: hope, gratitude, and amazement. He gently took the sandwich and nodded to Prince George, his eyes filling with tears. The prince smiled back, the kind of pure, innocent smile that children give when they know they've done something good. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest as he watched this exchange. In 23 years of royal service, he had never witnessed anything quite like this moment. Marcus expected Prince George to walk away after giving the sandwich, but the boy remained at the gate. He seemed genuinely interested in talking to the elderly man, despite the obvious differences in their circumstances. Marcus moved closer, staying hidden behind a large rose bush so he could hear their conversation while remaining ready to protect the prince if needed. "Are you hungry?" Prince George asked in his clear, innocent voice. The question was simple, but Marcus could hear real concern in it. The boy wasn't asking out of curiosity or politeness. He genuinely wanted to know if this stranger was suffering. The elderly man nodded slowly. "I haven't eaten since yesterday morning, young sir," he replied quietly. His voice was gentle and educated, surprising Marcus. This wasn't what he had expected from a homeless person near the palace grounds. There was dignity in the man's manner, despite his difficult circumstances. "What's your name?" Prince George continued, settling down to sit cross-legged on the ground near the gate. Marcus nearly stepped forward to stop him from sitting on the dirt, but something held him back. The prince's natural behavior felt more important than maintaining his clean clothes. "My name is William, Your Highness," the man replied. Marcus was surprised that the homeless man recognized Prince George, but he seemed to understand the importance of being respectful. "William Foster? I used to be a teacher before I lost my job and then my home." Prince George's eyes widened with interest. "You were a teacher? What did you teach?" The boy's genuine curiosity was evident in every word. Marcus realized that Prince George was treating this man exactly the same way he treated his tutors and other adults in his life, with respect and real interest. William's face brightened slightly. "I taught history and literature at a secondary school. I loved helping young people learn about the world and discover the power of stories." As he spoke about his former profession, Marcus could see the man's dignity returning. It was clear that teaching had been more than just a job for him. "I love stories too," Prince George said excitedly. "My tutor reads me stories about brave knights and kind kings." "Do you know any good stories?" The boy's enthusiasm was infectious, and Marcus watched as William's expression continued to soften. For the next few minutes, Marcus listened as William began telling Prince George a story about a young prince who disguised himself as a common person to learn about his kingdom. The homeless man's voice grew stronger as he spoke, and Marcus could see why he had been a teacher. Even in his current circumstances, he had a natural gift for engaging with children. Prince George listened with complete attention, asking questions and making comments that showed he was really thinking about the story's meaning. Marcus found himself drawn into the tale as well, impressed by William's storytelling ability and the genuine connection forming between the unlikely pair. As the story concluded, Prince George looked thoughtful. "That prince learned important things by talking to regular people, didn't he said. "Maybe all princes should do that." The wisdom in his young voice surprised Marcus, who had always seen the boy as simply energetic and curious. William nodded seriously. "Yes, Your Highness. Sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers." He looked directly at Prince George as he said this, and Marcus realized that both the man and the boy understood they were teaching each other something valuable. Captain Marcus Thompson had served the royal family for 23 years. His broad shoulders and stern expression made him the perfect picture of a royal guard. Every morning at dawn, he would stand outside the palace gates, watching over the grounds with eyes that missed nothing. The other guards respected him deeply, and the royal staff knew they could count on his unwavering dedication. Marcus came from a military family. His father had been a soldier, and his grandfather before him. Service to the crown was in his blood. When he first put on the royal uniform, he felt a deep sense of pride and purpose. He had protected 3 generations of royals, always maintaining perfect discipline and proper distance. The job required him to be invisible, yet always present. He learned to read situations quickly, to spot trouble before it started, and to move with silent efficiency. Over the years, he had prevented numerous security incidents, always staying in the background while keeping the royal family safe. His colleagues often joked that Marcus was like a human shield, ready to step in front of any danger. But something had been changing in Marcus recently. After 2 decades of service, the rigid protocols and endless formalities were wearing on him. He found himself questioning whether this life of constant vigilance and emotional distance was what he truly wanted. The palace walls that once felt like home now seemed like a beautiful prison. Marcus had been thinking about retirement more often. He imagined a small cottage in the countryside, perhaps near his sister's family. He could finally relax, maybe even start that woodworking hobby he had always pushed aside. The thought of sleeping past dawn and having conversations that weren't about security protocols filled him with a longing he hadn't expected. His wife Sarah had been patient for years, understanding that his duty came first. But lately, she had been dropping gentle hints about wanting him home more often. Their children were grown now, but she wanted to travel, to spend time together without the constant worry about his safety. Marcus knew she deserved better than a husband who was always emotionally guarded, trained to keep everyone at arm's length. The morning routine continued as always. Marcus checked his watch, adjusted his uniform, and prepared for another day of silent service. He had no idea that this particular day would change everything he thought he knew about duty, loyalty, and what truly mattered in life. The young prince he had watched grow up was about to teach him a lesson that would shake the very foundation of his beliefs. As he walked through the palace corridors, Marcus reflected on all the royal children he had protected over the years. Each one had their own personality, their own way of dealing with the pressures of royal life. But Prince George had always been different. There was something genuine about the boy, something that reminded Marcus why he had chosen this path in the first place. Marcus knew he should end this interaction. Protocol demanded that he step forward, politely move Prince George away from the gate, and arrange for William to be escorted from the palace grounds. Every rule he had learned in his 23 years of service told him this situation had gone on too long. But something deeper than training kept him rooted in place. The bond forming between Prince George and William seemed too precious to interrupt. Marcus realized he was witnessing something that couldn't be taught in any royal etiquette class or learned from any handbook. This was authentic human connection, the kind that future leaders desperately needed to understand. Prince George suddenly looked directly toward Marcus's hiding spot behind the rose bush. "Captain Thompson," he called out gently, "I know you're there. Would you please come here?" The boy's voice held no fear or guilt, just calm certainty that what he was doing was right. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat as he realized he had been discovered. Slowly, he emerged from behind the bush, his hand instinctively moving to adjust his uniform. As he approached the gate, he expected to see defiance or worry in Prince George's eyes, but instead found only honesty and hope. "Captain Thompson, this is my friend William," Prince George said with the simple directness that only children possess. "He used to be a teacher, and he's been sleeping outside because he doesn't have a home. I've been talking to him, and he's very wise and kind." Marcus looked at William through the iron bars and saw something unexpected in the man's eyes. There was no resentment or anger despite his difficult circumstances. Instead, Marcus saw dignity, intelligence, and a deep gratitude for the kindness Prince George had shown him. This wasn't a threat to security. This was a man whose only crime had been falling victim to circumstances beyond his control. "Your Highness," Marcus began, his voice more uncertain than usual, "we should perhaps return to your lessons." But even as he spoke the words, they felt hollow. What lesson could be more valuable than what Prince George was already learning? Prince George looked up at Marcus with those serious eyes that sometimes seemed too old for his 8-year-old face. "Captain Thompson, shouldn't we help Mr. William? He's hungry and cold and he doesn't have anywhere safe to sleep. If we can help people, shouldn't we?" The question hit Marcus with unexpected force. In all his years of following orders and maintaining protocols, when had he last asked himself such a simple yet profound question? When had duty become more important than humanity? William spoke up quietly from his position outside the gate. "Captain, the young prince has been nothing but kind to me. I would never do anything to harm him or cause trouble for the royal family. He has a beautiful spirit, and I hope the world never changes that about him." Marcus found himself looking back and forth between Prince George and William, seeing something he had missed in decades of royal service. The true strength of royalty didn't come from distance and formality. It came from connection, understanding, and the courage to care about others despite the risks. "What would you suggest we do, Your Highness?" Marcus heard himself asking. The words surprised him even as he spoke them. For the first time in his career, he was asking a child for guidance, and somehow it felt completely natural. Prince George's face lit up with hope. "Could we find Mr. William a warm place to stay? And maybe some food? I know there are rooms in the palace that nobody uses. Couldn't he stay in one of those until he finds a new job?" The boy's solution was simple and logical, spoken with the confidence of someone who had never been told that. Helping others was complicated. Marcus felt the last of his rigid protocols crumbling as he looked at the hope in both Prince George's and William's faces. He realized that this moment would define not just the rest of his career, but the kind of person he wanted to be. Marcus stood at the gate for what felt like an eternity, though it was probably only a few seconds. His mind raced through the implications of what Prince George was asking. Every security protocol screamed against it. Every rule he had learned warned him of the dangers of allowing strangers onto palace grounds. His training told him to politely decline and move the prince away from this situation. But as he looked at William, Marcus saw something that changed his perspective completely. This wasn't a dangerous stranger trying to gain access to the royal family. This was a fellow human being who had fallen on hard times, someone who had once contributed to society as a teacher, and now found himself forgotten by the very system he had served. "Mr. William," Marcus said, his voice gentler than his usual authoritative tone, "would you be willing to undergo a security check if it meant we could help you find temporary accommodation?" The words surprised Marcus as much as they seemed to surprise William. William's eyes widened in disbelief. "Captain, I would submit to any process necessary. I'm not looking for charity, just a chance to get back on my feet. I would be happy to work for any assistance provided." The dignity in his response impressed Marcus even more. Prince George clapped his hands together excitedly. "Does that mean we can help him, Captain Thompson?" The pure joy in the boy's voice reminded Marcus why he had chosen royal service in the first place. It wasn't about following rules. It was about serving something greater than himself. Marcus made a decision that went against every protocol in his handbook. "Your Highness, let's see what we can do." He reached for his radio to contact the security office, knowing that this moment would likely end his career as he knew it. Within an hour, Marcus had arranged for William to be processed through security. The man's background check revealed exactly what he had claimed: a dedicated teacher with no criminal record who had simply fallen victim to economic circumstances. Marcus vouched personally for William's character, putting his own reputation on the line. Prince George stayed nearby during the entire process, insisting that he wanted to make sure his new friend was properly taken care of. Marcus watched as the boy naturally took responsibility for the situation he had initiated, showing leadership qualities that couldn't be taught in any classroom. By afternoon, William had been provided with a temporary room in the staff quarters and a meal in the palace kitchen. Prince George had personally escorted him there, introducing William to the kitchen staff as "my friend who's going to stay with us for a while." The staff, accustomed to following the prince's requests, welcomed William warmly. Marcus realized that in helping William, Prince George had accomplished something remarkable. He had shown that royalty at its best was about service to others, not separation from them. The boy had demonstrated genuine leadership by seeing a problem and taking action to solve it, regardless of conventions or protocols. As the day ended, Marcus found himself walking through the palace corridors with a strange sense of lightness. For the first time in years, he felt that his service had truly mattered. He had helped facilitate an act of genuine kindness rather than simply maintaining empty traditions. That evening, Marcus sat in his small office writing a report that he knew would change everything. He detailed the events of the day, explaining his decision to help William and his reasoning behind it. As he wrote, he realized that this incident had shown him what royal service should really look like. The report would reach his supervisors the next morning, and Marcus knew there would be consequences for his deviation from protocol. But as he sealed the envelope containing his account of the day's events, he felt more certain of his actions than he had about anything in years. Prince George had taught him that sometimes the most important duty was to set aside duty itself in favor of humanity. The next morning, Marcus was called into a meeting with the head of palace security and several senior officials. He walked into the room expecting to face disciplinary action, possibly even dismissal. His report had been read, and the unprecedented nature of his decisions had clearly caused concern among the leadership. "Captain Thompson," the security chief began, "your actions yesterday were highly irregular. Allowing an unauthorized person onto palace grounds goes against every protocol we have in place." Marcus stood at attention, prepared to accept whatever consequences awaited him. But then something unexpected happened. Prince George's father entered the room, having apparently requested to be present for this meeting. Marcus had served the royal family long enough to recognize when someone was pleased versus when they were angry, and he was surprised to see what looked like approval in the prince's father's expression. "Captain Thompson," the senior royal said, "my son told me about yesterday's events. He was quite excited to share the story of how you helped him assist someone in need." Marcus felt his heart rate increase, uncertain what this meant for his future. The room was silent for a moment before the prince's father continued. "My son also told me that you could have stopped him from helping Mr. William, but instead you chose to find a way to make his kindness possible. Is that accurate?" Marcus straightened his shoulders. "Yes, Your Highness. Prince George saw someone in need and wanted to help. I felt that supporting his compassionate instincts was more important than following strict protocol in that particular situation." A small smile appeared on the senior royal's face. "Captain Thompson, do you know what my son told me last night? He said that you showed him what it really means to serve others. He said you taught him that sometimes being a good person is more important than following rules." The security officials in the room looked uncomfortable with this turn in the conversation, but Marcus felt a weight lifting from his shoulders. Prince George had understood exactly what had happened yesterday, and more importantly, he had learned the lesson that Marcus had hoped he would learn. "However," the prince's father continued, "I understand that this incident has made you question whether royal service is the right path for you moving forward." Marcus was startled that his inner conflict had been so transparent, but he nodded honestly. "Your Highness yesterday showed me that I've spent so many years focused on protecting the royal family from the world that I may have lost sight of why that protection matters. Prince George reminded me that royalty should be connected to the people they serve, not separated from them." The senior royal nodded thoughtfully. "Captain Thompson, you've served our family with dedication for over 2 decades. If you feel that your service here has run its course, you should know that you leave with our deepest gratitude and respect." Marcus felt tears forming in his eyes as he realized he was being offered an honorable conclusion to his career, rather than facing punishment. "Thank you, Your Highness. This decision has been weighing on my heart for some time." 3 weeks later, Marcus stood in the palace courtyard for the last time as a royal guard. Prince George had insisted on being present for his farewell, despite it being an informal departure rather than an official ceremony. The boy approached Marcus with the serious expression he wore when something was truly important to him. "Captain Thompson," Prince George said, "thank you for teaching me that helping people is always the right thing to do, even when it's not easy." The 8-year-old then did something that surprised everyone present. He hugged Marcus tightly, ignoring all protocols about physical contact with security personnel. As Marcus hugged the boy back, he realized that his 23 years of service had led to this perfect moment. He had helped shape a future king who understood that true strength came from compassion, not from power or distance. 6 months later, Marcus received a letter at his countryside cottage. Prince George had written to tell him that William had found a new teaching position at a school near the palace and was doing well. The boy had also included a drawing of the three of them standing together by the palace gate, with a message that read, "Thank you for showing me what it means to really protect people." Marcus smiled as he read the letter, knowing that his most important work as a royal guard had been accomplished not through following orders, but through following his heart.